Naruto exclusive videos Lemon come out on my Boosty. You can watch and subscribe. Link in the description, like the video and write a comment, enjoy watching. Description: Naruto finally understood. He was only needed to fulfill the prophecy. In this world, in this place, at this time, no one else needed him for anything, so why should he be there? But Hagoromo, seeing the pain of his son not receiving love for all his life, decided to change his life by throwing Naruto into an alternate past. But who said that everything would be so simple? Chapter 29. Council of the Maelstrom. Yesterday evening, when the twilight still did not allow the night to swallow the sky in its embrace, I sent one of my ANBU to tell Takeshi-san and Ashinagi-san that tomorrow morning we need to convene a council of Uzumaki elders, since I have an idea related to a new branch of ninja art, and I need to clarify this point with them. A few minutes later, Bor came to me again saying that the Uzukage and the clan had agreed to hold a council and called me to the village head's office at 9 in the morning. This was not surprising, since they always welcomed me and my ideas, so before going to bed I prepared myself for a difficult conversation, perhaps more than one. Today, to my surprise, I was the last one to wake up. By the time I washed up, made my bed and got dressed, everyone was sitting in our kitchen and heatedly discussing their plans for the day. It turns out that Momo and Akira asked to start their training outside of the ninja training program, and Naruto started arguing with them that outside of the training program, you need to rest, otherwise you will get overtired, get injured, and then recover with a loss of time for 2 or 3 weeks. Mito kept silent and just played with Kimiko, who was slobbering on her shoulder and cooing happily. This is beautiful. I won't stop saying it. This sight touched me so much that if I were more sentimental, I would have cried. But I just smiled and said good morning. In return I received an awkward greeting. Then I sat down at the table and thanked for the food and began my meal. While eating, I listened as the children gave in to the argument with Naruto, and she threw her hands up and let out a victory cry. Then she went to coo with Kimiko. Akira and Momo along with me and Mito had to go to the academy, so we started getting ready. On the way to the academy we met a lot of people. They all greeted us and bowed. After all, next to me is the former heiress of the Uzumaki clan, the wife of the current head Namikaze Ikizoku with the heirs of the clan. Yes, Akira and Momo, even being our adopted children, are the prince and Haim of the clan. Also, I, being the son-in-law of the Uzukage, was not the last person. So yes, many people knew us. After we sent the children to the Shinobi Academy, Mito and I walked towards the residences. The road was full, children from different clans were running around everywhere playing with each other. The adults were peacefully chatting and watching the children. Overall it was a peaceful environment, which made me happy. Because I thought that because the clans were too close to each other, conflicts could happen, but there were too few of them, compared to what happens in other villages. Oh yeah, I've heard about all sorts of incidents from different hidden villages. How the Honorable Hayuza clan, from which the missing Nin Deidara came out in his time, began to bomb one of the districts of Tsuchi no Kuni due to a whim and quarrel with the noble Kyora clan, who possessed the bloodline of releasing dust. It was a dangerous clan, even though not all of the Kyora Ikizoku were able to activate their bloodline, they were able to become invisible or completely split into two. On the other hand, in Kiri, 6 clans cannot cooperate with each other and are trying to grab more territory for themselves. Although they formed a hidden village, this did not help them settle their conflicts. Hozuki and Kagaya captured the most territory, followed by Hoshikage, Karatachi, Suikazen and Kurasuki. Soon this conflict may come back to haunt them when they start to drag each other to the bottom, and the clanless, on the contrary, will start to gain influence. In Kumo, everything changes very dramatically. Raijin Ikizoku, in which A was the head, began to absorb other clans, becoming on the same level as the great clans. As a result, in Kumo, besides them, there was only one Ikizoku with the storm release bloodline. It is a matter of time when Kumo will be left without clans and there will be a single clan that has become a village like Uzumaki in the past. In Suna, 5 clans Akasuno, Sabaku no, Ryudoin, Shinki and Azuru are trying to find a constant flow of water and food, which they previously obtained through raids on Hai no Kuni. Now they have a hard time because of Konoha, which does not allow them into its possessions. Next to others, everything was relatively calm in Konoha, unless of course you dig deeper and see how the Uchiha dominates and suppresses other clans. No, the clans had relative freedom of action, but everything was still under the control of the Uchiha. I have a feeling that this will accumulate anger in the village until this situation results in a civil war or the collapse of Konoha. Wow, it will be interesting to see what will happen to the other villages. While I was thinking about all this, we reached the Yuzuki's office. Everyone was already there. Only me and Mito were missing. Oh, Yasushi wasn't there yet, although that's not surprising, because he said that he wouldn't engage in politics, he would rather train to become stronger. It seems that Takashi and I were really annoying him with requests to replace him at work. On the other hand, Nori and Ariza looked refreshed. Ariza even had some wrinkles gone. Naruto's herbs definitely helped to rejuvenate her skin. At the same time, the petite Nori smiled at us and greeted us. Ohio, Muzum-chan, Naruto-san, she nodded to us easily. After her, everyone else began to greet us. To this I responded with my own deeper bow and greeting. Naruto-kun, why did you call us today? Ashina asked relaxedly, smoking tobacco with his pipe. Yes, recently Ashina Uzumaki, the old devil from Yuzushiogakure, started smoking tobacco with incense. Although, it is even useful for him, since it cleanses the lungs, strengthens the chakra channels in the lungs, trachea, larynx and nasopharynx, making elemental jutsu related to the oral cavity much easier to bear. Let's say the same fireball will not burn much with its intensive use. In fact, Ashinaji, I have 2 suggestions that will help us in the future. I sat down in my place and pulled the blushing Mito onto my lap. The elders only nodded approvingly at this, and my wife simply buried her nose in my chest. At this time, Nori said that she would go and make us tea and left the office. Tell me, Takashi said quickly, taking out a notebook. It's not surprising. I gave them so many new ideas that it would be a sin not to write it down first. I'll start with the fact that once, when I was 13, I met one of the A-class criminals. He was an unrivaled swordsman, whose sword was called Kubikuribocho, or in other words, decapitator. This sword had the ability to self-repair thanks to the blood it touched. There were 7 such swords. 7 legendary swords of Kirigakure. And these swords appeared in Kirigakure no Sato from the moment of the destruction of Yuzushiogakure no Sato. I shut up, letting them digest this information and come to my conclusion themselves. After all, they are adults, and not stupid. I see, so I did make them, Ashina chuckled, which instantly riveted all eyes to himself. What do you mean? Ariza asked puzzledly, looking at her husband. He never had secrets from her, and she was embarrassed by the fact that he began to hide something from her. Well, recently, I began to study 2 new sections of Fuinjutsu where the goal is to seal abilities and the laws of physics. One of the subsections of sealing abilities is sealing them into material things with the subsequent use of these abilities. This became available to me thanks to the scrolls of our clan from the future, which I received from Naruto back when he and Naruto came to Yuzu. Another me, before the destruction of Yuzushio, was able to create 7 swords with their interesting abilities, and I would like to ask, will you be able to create them again? I think I'll play with this and maybe even create more things, because Takashi recently took on responsibility for the clan and I have a lot of time. It will be interesting to create swords similar to Kiba's swords, but with different elements. Or maybe I didn't finish Kiba's swords and they were actually supposed to have all the elements. Ashina chuckled slightly at the thought of such strong swords, and I raised an eyebrow, because I didn't think he even knew what swords he created in a parallel future. Although, probably in the archive that I gave Ashina there were step-by-step instructions on how, what and why to do. And the final results were recorded. Thank you very much. It would be great if you made 10 swords urgently. I can send several ANBU to you as apprentices, I chuckled. About ANBU. I think only Makoto, Takashi and Ariza can help me with these seals, so I would be pleased if you gave me Makoto, because Takashi and Ariza have their own responsibilities. Ashina puffed on his pipe. Will do. What about the 10 swords? Ariza asked, still watching me stroke Mito's head. Her breathing evened out, which meant that she had fallen asleep. Let her sleep. Well, this is an interesting situation. I tested 10 ANBU, they passed my test and I would like them to become the first generation of Yuzushiogakure swordsmen, I grinned. The others shuddered at the word, test, and this is not surprising, since they knew how ruthless Naruto can be sometimes. I see, Ashina nodded, if my calculations are correct, Makoto and I can do everything in 2 or 3 months. If Arizu and Takashi help, you will have all 10 swords in less than a month. But I would like to ask. Is Yasushi in that 10? Yes, Yasushi is in that 10, I nodded, grinning widely. Everyone shuddered again, but for a different reason. My poor boy, Ariza thought with horror. Then if this is over, what's your second suggestion? Takashi picked up the conversation. His wife was already sitting next to him, and the tea was laid out in front of everyone. We slowly began to drink it, savoring the taste of freshly brewed tea. Training in the Sennin mode, I said. Everyone looked at me thoughtfully, assessing me from head to toe. I don't know what they were trying to see, but I felt a little uneasy. We know that you can use Senjutsu, but training it is a dangerous undertaking, Takashi said calmly. Ashina leaned back on the sofa, closing his eyes and exhaling deeply. And this reaction? Has anyone really tried to train in the Sennin mode yet? But the Sennin are a great military asset. Training just 4 or 5 people will greatly increase our combat power. The sages can even stand on the same level as the Kage. Ariza looked uncertainly at her husband. She knew what a tragedy he had experienced. At the time, this news was almost the most discussed in Yuzushio. However, so many years had passed that the wound left by his brother's death should have healed by now. I can't give you my approval for training. Just as I can't forbid you from doing this. Ashina puffed on his pipe and finally opened his eyes. Eyes in which old pain was visible. No, it would be more correct to say an echo of this pain. What happened? Mito sleepily rubbed her eyes and looked at us. After that, the sleep disappeared as if by magic, although nothing surprising, anyone would have woken up from such tension in the room. Naruto suggested that we take up Senjutsu training. What? Mito looked at me in surprise and then, slightly startled, turned to her grandfather. I still didn't understand what was going on here, but it was clear that it was connected with Ashina-ji and his personal experience with Senjutsu. My uncle, Akihiro Uzumaki, died when he began to master the art of Senjutsu. At that time, my father was somewhere in his 40s, and I was about 5 or 6. Akihiro Aji-san was his older brother. He had no family and he joked about being a hermit without a hermit regime, and that he would probably begin to master it. In the end, he simply turned into stone. No screams, no pain, a simple transformation into stone. So we didn't even raise this topic in our family. Takashi enlightened me. Ashina tensed up slightly during his words. I'm sorry for your loss. I felt a little guilty for bringing this up. But it was still important for me to start this training, and in general, not only for me. If the negotiations were unsuccessful, then all was lost, since it was the Sennin, Jinchuriki, and swordsmen who would have to hold back the onslaught of Konoha and the other villages. But please do not let your pain cloud your judgment when making this choice. I can teach Senjutsu. Look, there is an example in the form of Naruto, whom I already taught in the past. Also, if it makes you feel better, this technique is considered the safest and most ancient. Even the Rikudo Sennin studied it. Rikudo Sennin? Absolutely everyone seemed interested in this. However, it was Arizu who voiced the question. Yes, the sage of the 6 paths, Hagoromo, the Otsutsuki, who is not from the Hagoromo clan. The progenitor of the shinobi world. He learned Senjutsu using the Toad method from Myobokuzen. I learned this method too, and I taught Naruto this method. As you can see, she's still not dead. I know my stuff. You just need to let me train the shinobi of our village. I looked at them firmly, showing my determination, but at the same time I understood that it would be better to tell them all the pros and cons right away so that they could make a more rational decision. Even though I'm talking about this, I can't give a 100% guarantee, since any training is a risk, we are not insured against accidents. I even knew a person who died from improper training in katanjutsu, choking on his own fire. Self-training is not always a good solution, but under my supervision, many risks will be safe. And who will you train if we agree? Ashina, who had already calmed down, raised an eyebrow. Sennin are a great military asset. These people usually don't sit in one place, especially near civilizations, and go into seclusion or travel. As you know, they can't be inconspicuous people, so the world will definitely find out about the Sennin from Uzushio. This will make our enemies wary, but they will also think twice before attacking us. Therefore, keeping Sennin in ANBU would be stupid in my opinion. Yes, they will make a great contribution to the development of the village, but their personal strength will not grow over the years. After all, this regime was not just called the hermit mode. The more you comprehend nature and seclusion, the stronger you become. Therefore, I was thinking about making a Senjutsu training course at the Uzushio Academy. People from any clan will be able to learn it, and then protect our village, and in peacetime, when their strength is no longer needed, they will go into seclusion. Don't you think that a large number of Sennin will make the target on Uzushio large? Also, many different people will be endowed with power. This can provoke conflicts in the village, Ashina noted. Oh, believe me, even if you invite 60 to 70 people to the course, I will select 20 to 30 of them, and out of these 20 to 30, a maximum of 10 will be able to stand until the end, the rest will give up halfway. I grinned bloodthirstily. At this, everyone shuddered again. Did I really scare them that much? About disagreements and conflicts due to a large number of strong shinobi, Sennin who have truly attained unity with nature will not strive for power, and the like. I already said that they will go into seclusion and try to live peacefully. This is the acceptance of nature into oneself. Nature does not want power, it does not want war, it does not want prestige. The only things that nature wants are peace and prosperity. Therefore, this is the best idea if you want to strengthen the fighting power of Uzushio in a safe way. And you will take people from all clans? Takashi asked. Why not? I shrugged lightly. As long as there are volunteers, I do not care about the clan, they will all be the defenders of these islands. Everyone sank into silence. No one broke this silence. We give you permission. Ashina nodded seriously after a few minutes of thought. Takashi looked at his father and nodded weakly in agreement with him. But Araizu tried to intervene. No buts. This is my decision, Araizu. The Yuzuki's father coldly noted. The scarlet-haired girl only pursed her lips and slightly nodded and stepped back. However, no one from my family will learn Senjutsu. Not even Mito. Mito wanted to object to her grandfather, but he suppressed any objections with just one look. I just smiled at him and nodded. I had no desire to argue with a man who wanted to protect his granddaughter. Yes, Mito would feel weak next to me or Naruto, but Senjutsu is not the only thing that can increase your strength. I will think of something for her. Then, let's call a council for tomorrow. Takashi chuckled, filling out the paper. A dove, he shouted into the void, pressing the button on the table. A second later an ANBU girl appeared in a mask of the named bird. Black tight clothes emphasized her curves and shapes, and the altered voice still gave off a sneer and playfulness familiar to everyone in the room. Hi, Takashi-sama, she drawled. Under the mask, I saw purple eyes that winked at me when we made eye contact. Make 10 copies of this paper and distribute them to all the clan heads except Namikaze-sama. Takashi chuckled cheerfully, looking at me. Yufufu, it will be done. Takashi's joy was contagious, as the ANBU girl with a soft laugh picked up the paper and disappeared from the office. Insufferable girl, Ashina chuckled. Araizu and Nori only shook their heads with a soft smile. I was again left surprised by the quick change in Uzumaki's mood. You haven't seen Lynx and Snake yet, I sighed sadly, remembering the girls who sometimes seem to have no chain of command at all. It seems they get paid more than anyone else, but are still the least disciplined. Uzushio Clan Heads Council. The next day. Now, in the Whirlpool Council room, there were 11 people. It would be better to say 11 brave ninja who were ready to protect what was most precious to them even at the cost of their own lives. For some it was family, for others, friends, and for others, it was the entire clan. However, they were united by one thing: they were all responsible for their ikizoku and were their leaders. They were all sitting at a semicircular table in front of which there was another empty table of Uzumaki authorities. On the far right sat the head of the Hatake clan. Yuchi Hatake, a middle-aged man with white hair that stuck up. His gaze was slightly tired, but focused. In principle, such a look was often boasted by war veterans who were already tired of being in battles. So, the current carefree life was good for the tired war veteran, and he was glad of such an opportunity to rest from the eternal battle. To his left sat Uchinoike, the head of Chinoike Ikizoku, a tall man who had recently gained a little weight. This man had at least managed to transform himself somewhat during his stay in Uzushio. His low ponytail had been cut into a short hairstyle, and his violet eyes did not look as doomed as when they lived in the Valley of Hell. And he was sincerely grateful to Uzumaki for such an opportunity to survive. Next to him sat a 25-year-old representative of the Hagoromo clan, showing by her appearance that she is the strongest in her own clan. Yoko Hagoromo, a confident chestnut-haired girl with not very long hair reaching her shoulders, but often tied in a bun, so as not to interfere in battle. As she said, she emanated the aura of a strong woman. Amazons, if it comes to that. The betrayal of the Uchiha greatly angered her, and in the heat of rage and inexperience, she decided to take revenge on the Uchiha and attack them, but lost miserably. Therefore, the Hagoromo clan had to flee the land of fire when the Uchiha and Senju created a common village. Fortunately, they were found by the Uzumaki and offered their help, which Hagoromo Ikizoku gladly accepted and never regretted it. Another woman followed her, but this time with red curly hair that formed a spruce when loose. She sighed languidly and licked her lips as she looked towards the head of the Namikaze clan. It was none other than Terumi Raya, the head of the Terumi clan, who had 2 Kekii Genkai in their lineage. Yes, despite the fact that almost all members of her clan had Kekii Genkai, only she managed to unlock both releases at once. Therefore, at the age of 30, she was the leader of her clan, and was extremely attractive, which she tried to take advantage of more than once. However, despite her mischievous nature and bad reputation, she was smart. And with her brains, she understood that the Terumi clan would not have lasted long in that war. Therefore, now she was sincerely glad for the opportunity for a week, but at least some respite. Behind her, with a proud face, was Sakikumo Kurama, the leader of Kurama Ikizoku. The strongest user of genjutsu on these islands, and simply a good person who cared about his clan and family. Being a man of about 40, he had black long hair that went down to the middle of his back and a mustache that emphasized his authority. And as a loving father and husband, he was simply happy that the Uzumaki were able to take their clan under their wing, since it meant that his relatives could risk their lives less, being in the middle of a peaceful island. On the left side of the head of the Kurama clan, right in the middle of the table, sat Takayuki Yuhi, his red eyes with noticeable amusement watching the torment of Rei, who, it would seem, would soon sigh for the 100th time in the last 10 minutes. This brunette, contrary to all expectations, became almost the best friend of the leader of the rival clan. Yes, just like the Kurama clan, the Yuhi clan were masters of genjutsu, so in Uzushio everyone thought that they would start a confrontation between themselves. However, everything happened exactly the opposite. Instead of a fight, Takayuki decided to make friends with his rival. After which, their clans became allies, considered the strongest alliance in Yuzu-no-Kuni. This was surprising, because such phenomena were very rare. Next to Takayuki, a man of average build, sat a kunoichi from Rinha Ikizoku, Malice Rinha. She had medium-length black hair with bangs covering one eye, bright brown, almost yellow eyes, and an average height for a kunoichi. And although this woman was the leader of the clan, she was definitely not a fighting type of person, as her clan was based mainly on medical ninjutsu and the Kekii Genkai techniques of their clan. She in turn was one of the best healers in Uzushio, and one who often spent her time discussing medicine with Nori and Naruto. As soon as her almost extinct clan came to Yuzashio, they occupied the hospital. More than half of the doctors and nurses were from this clan. This was good for both Uzumaki and Rinha, as they shared the secrets of medical ninjutsu with each other. And also the Rinha clan could easily recover after the war. Malice herself was able to save her son Yuto from death in the clan wars. To her left sat the head of the Yuki clan, Shiroka Yuki, the white-haired queen of cold, whose personality was like the embodiment of winter. At one time, her soft, snow-like personality could turn into hard ice. The aura around her could suddenly become cold in the literal sense of the word. And when she was angered, she became merciless like a snowstorm. Often, her face was expressionless, which in the Whirlpool Islands came to be called an ice face. But despite this, she was a kind soul who protected her little sister Kuron. And so, she was grateful to the Uzumaki for agreeing to accept the Yuki clan to their island. Behind her, with a wide, white-toothed smile, sat a black-haired man of about 27 or 28 years old, with a short cap-style haircut and thick eyebrows. Might Taimori, a man who could make others shudder with his enthusiasm. A man who, with the determination of a lion, went through war protecting his comrades, becoming at 25 the strongest taijutsu user in his clan. This man was so skilled in close combat that he had already learned about 20 fighting styles, and could easily match the strength of the head of the Hyuga clan. However, despite this, the clan of taijutsu masters was on the verge of destruction, since among them there were no good healers, no support shinobi, no long-range or mid-range shinobi, which made battles in squads difficult. Yes, individually, if in sparring, then the members of this clan are strong. However, the clan itself was not strong, although potentially good. So when Mito proposed an alliance, the members of this clan almost broke the ribs of the entire squad with their hugs. Some of the more impressionable ones even wanted to kiss everyone. Sitting next to last was the stone-faced leader of the Suzuki Ikizoku, Raiden Suzuki. He had well-groomed blonde hair that fell to his waist and dull green eyes. The man was unremarkable, as he did not train his body much, preferring long-range combat like all members of his clan. Their ability to fly gave them the ability to avoid close combat, so they were almost the opposite of the Taimori clan in physicality. However, like that clan, they were almost destroyed. And it was the Raijin clan that was to blame for this, who could use the element of lightning to accelerate. So they were glad to be able to avoid such a fate, and for this they thanked Uzumaki Ikizoku. On the far left sat the head of the Namikaze clan, Naruto Namikaze, a tall blonde man with a good build and an indifferent expression. The son-in-law of the current Yuzukage and possibly the strongest shinobi of Yuzushio, although some argue that Kayanashi, the leader of ANBU, is stronger than him, not knowing that they are the same person. Whirlpool Flash, Genius Technician, Elusive Ninja, they call him by different names, but he does not care about these titles. The main thing is to protect what is dear to him. All this attracted women very much, so even now, when he has 2 wives, women and girls are trying to attract him. And why not? This man is handsome, strong and influential. He also already has a harem of 2 girls, one of whom was his sister. Yes, he is a walking taboo on taboo. So, girls and fathers who wanted to make a marriage of convenience really devoted a lot of time to him. Many even offered him concubines to strengthen the alliance between their clans, but Naruto always politely refused the others. In general, there was no heavy, tense atmosphere in the office where so many influential people were. People knew each other, often communicated, and some were even friends with others. Might Taimori almost competed with all the heads, trying to surpass them in strength and considering it a sacred duty of the strength of youth. Therefore, when the 7 Uzumaki entered the room, everyone politely stood up and bowed without showing any tension, only respect. 5 of them, Ashina Uzumaki, Takashi Uzumaki, Yasushi Uzumaki, Araizu Uzumaki and Nori Uzumaki sat down at the table. One of the accompanying persons stood behind Takashi, who was sitting in the middle of the straight table opposite the clan heads. It was Kayanashi, the leader of the ANBU operatives. His ward, the second accompanying person, remained near the door at attention. As soon as the people bowed and the Uzumaki took their places, there was complete silence. The clan heads were focused, since only 2 such councils had been held before, and if the first council was about building a village on the second island where all the Uzushio clans now lived, except for the Uzumaki of course, the second was about Konoha's actions towards Uzushio-gakure. Therefore, all the heads perceived this council as something serious. "Hello, heads of Ikuzoku Uzushio," Takashi began his speech. "I am the first Yuzukage of Uzushio-gakure no Sato Takashi Uzumaki. I greet you and declare the meeting of the Uzushio-gakure clan council open. Now I will tell you for what purpose this council was convened. Yesterday, Naruto Dano came to our office with an interesting idea. The idea was that the academy program would include training in a new branch of art exclusively for Jonin. Training in the sacred mode, or Senjutsu for short." At these words everyone suddenly straightened up and looked at Naruto in surprise, and then at Takashi. "We discussed this idea all day yesterday and accepted Naruto Dano's proposal with some nuances. At first, we wanted to simply add Senjutsu to the training program without prior notice, but this would have generated a lot of questions and indignation, so we called a meeting to inform you." "Do you have any questions about this?" "Yes, we do." Yoko Hagoromo nodded after a few minutes of processing the information, looking from the head of the Namikaze clan to the leader of the village. "Naruto Dano, the art of the sacred mode is a very ancient and complex branch of ninja art. For generations we have been forbidden to practice it, and not without reason. All people who tried to master Senjutsu either went crazy like the members of the Yugo clan or turned into stone. And I wonder if you have found anyone who is competent to teach Senjutsu?" "Yes, I know one person who is competent to teach the Sennin mode." Naruto nodded weakly. Everyone immediately pricked up their ears listening to the blonde. "That person is me. I have been practicing the Sennin mode for over 10 years, and I had the opportunity to teach one student." If the clan heads were surprised by this, they did not show their emotions. The only reaction they showed was Rei licking her lips. However, the Ikizoka heads were still silent, pushing Naruto to continue the conversation. "This student is Naruko Namikaze, and as you can see, she is alive." Everyone confirmed this remark with nods, but Yuchi Hatake was not satisfied with the answer, so he asked his own question. "Can you demonstrate the hermit mode for us?" "Yes, of course, give me a few moments." Naruto nodded, collecting his thoughts, for a faster collection of nature energy and mixing it with the spiritual and physical energy of his neutral chakra. It took about 30 seconds, which meant a lot of practice in Senjutsu. As soon as he entered the hermit mode, his presence disappeared from the perception of other ninja. Inbu looked askance first at Kayanashi, whose chakra was also impossible to sense, then at Naruto. Comparing their physiques and remembering the history of Kayanashi's appearance, he came to certain conclusions. The others did not pay attention to this, looking straight at the intricate pattern on the blonde's face that resembled the pattern around the eyes of a cheetah. "What is your summoning? These marks reaching your mouth do not allow me to understand who your summoning is," Yuchi asked with curiosity in his voice. "My summoning is cheetahs," Namikaze answered monotonously, "the feline family, a subfamily of big cats." "I see, Naruko-san has the same summoning, am I right?" Malice asked with a slight smile. Naruto indicated his answer with a nod. "Then will she also teach this Senjutsu of yours?" "No, she doesn't have enough experience to teach others. After a few years of practicing the sage art, I'll give her permission to have her own students." "How did it happen that you learned the hermit art more than 10 years ago, but your twin didn't?" Raiden asked, emphasizing the word twin. Everyone immediately thought about it and looked at the head of Namikaze expectantly. Naruto only narrowed his eyes. "I see we're having a small talk here where personal things are discussed," he said sarcastically in response. "Then let me go get some tea and we'll chat." "Forgive me if I've gone too far in my curiosity," the head of Suzuki Ikizoka answered evenly. An awkward silence formed, so Takashi quickly took matters into his own hands. "I have an idea. For the first stream of students, I would like to hold a promotion so that you choose one member of your clan who is persistent and motivated enough to finish training in Senjutsu. Naruto Dano's first students will be from each clan, This will strengthen the ties between our clans and make sure that no one is left, so to speak, overboard. I am for this idea, Rhea spoke first. Are there any requirements for training in the Sennin regime? I mean, what should we take into account when selecting Jonin? A large enough amount of chakra, good chakra control, mental and physical endurance, and probably courage. The result of training can be fatal. The summoning contract is not required, the students will receive it during training. Age and gender do not matter. If there are any enthusiasts among you, feel free to sign up for this program. Naruto finished his speech. Sorry, but what if one of the clans has a small amount of chakra? As unpleasant as it was for Might to admit, but the Taimori clan did not have large reserves of chakra. Yes, there was chakra, and they could use it, but these reserves were not even close to those who focused more on ninjutsu. Sakikumo Kurama and Takayuki Yuhi were in the same position, because good control and predisposition were required for genjutsu, and not large amounts of chakra, which on the contrary interfered with good control. Believe me, even a genin can be taught senjutsu, but the process will be much more difficult than training a jonin. These requirements are needed as a basis from which training will be based. But I believe that with your persistence, you cannot worry about this problem. Just choose the most suitable shinobi. From Naruto's words, Mato's eyes almost lit up, so great was the enthusiasm of this man. The others, at the sight of the face of the head of Taimori Ikizoku, shuddered from terrible memories. Then I have one last question. Shiroka Yuki raised her hand. Are Tokubetsu Jonin included in the list of those who can be trained? Yes, Tokujo are also jounin, albeit narrowly focused. Naruto nodded, and Shiroka chuckled with satisfaction. Apparently she wants to send her sister for training. Then, if you have no questions, this meeting is closed. You have a week to choose a candidate for a student. The training program will begin in 2 weeks. Good luck to you and goodbye, Takashi said, getting up from his seat. The heads of the clans, as well as the Uzumaki elders, stood up and bowed slightly, showing their respect. Chapter 30. Report. It was a sunny morning on the Yuzushiogakure no Sato Islands. Today, Akira Namikaze trained with his father in the art of handling a katana. Finally! The first training in a long time. And with his father, who is often on missions than he is at the academy. He shouldn't be so capricious as to complain to his father about his inability to pay attention to him, but it still hurt. Fortunately, his father seemed to understand why his son was upset and invited him to today's training, which Akira was undoubtedly happy about. Akira was ready to learn cool techniques with cool names, but Naruto gave him a katana at the last moment and said that he would teach him how to wield a sword. The little blonde shoulders sagged for a moment, but a moment later they opened up again, and his eyes lit up with passion and determination. He would learn everything his father said and make Naruto proud of him. Well, let's start with a warm-up, 20 laps around the training ground. Akira shuddered and looked at me, and then at the entire clearing, expressing his disbelief. 20? He finally shouted accusingly, pointing at me. Chan, who trains like that? I won't even be able to lift a sword later. Do you have the audacity to question my judgment? I leaned over menacingly to scare him. Or do you want to run even more? I understand. The next second the boy disappeared, leaving behind nothing but dust. I chuckled. He was so much like me. Only he was calmer and less childish than I was in his time. This was good in principle, and would serve him well. And while Akira was running around in circles, I decided to build the perfect Senjutsu training ground. Doton, vertical rock peaks. A second later, the ground began to shake and 39 pillars with a sharp end rushed upward. These peaks were divided into 3 levels by height. If the lower level did not reach even 7 meters, then the highest were almost 50 meters in height. Exactly as much as needed for the 13 shinobi that I was informed about this morning. Wow, an admiring voice was heard nearby. Turning around, I saw Akira in a state of awe. What are you standing for? Akira came out of his state of shock and looked at me in confusion. Had he already forgotten about his training? Rolling my eyes, I reminded him, you're kind of in the middle of the exercise. Come on, you still have 19 laps. The boy muttered something under his breath, but obeyed and continued to run. I looked at the miracle peaks I had made and continued to set up the training ground point 2 hours later. Bend your knees and keep your body straight for a quick dash. You can't lean forward, because that will mean that you will only dash forward. The enemy can jump up and strike from above or along the edges. Akira adjusted his stance the way I told him. In general, he learns quickly, not even close to me or Naruto. It seems that only we in our clan are such unique individuals who needed shadow clones for quick learning, because Momo also learns quite quickly for her age. And there was no talk about my father at all, because he is almost a genius among geniuses. Tachan, are you okay? Akira was still standing in a Kenjutsu stance, not moving and waiting for my command. What persistence! The spring of youth is boiling in him. Yes, I was just thinking. So where was I? Exactly. Now the theory, you can stop standing in a stance. The boy sighed with relief and sat down on the green grass. Let's start from the beginning. What part of the katana is called swift? Where the tip of the sword is, Akira said, pointing to the edge of the katana. That's right, this is the part of the sword that is needed for a counterattack or a swift attack. The boy listened to my little lecture with admiration. This made me smile weakly, but you shouldn't block blows with this part, since this part of the blade is weak. You should block, receive, and deflect blows with the middle of the blade. Any questions? Yes, Akira hesitated slightly. And how do you and Kachan cut trees and stones with just ordinary kanai and ninjato? Ha, we're just cool, even trees and stones admit it, and don't resist much. I deigned to grin widely. Well, Tachan, tell me please, he whined. I had to sigh. Okay. Actually, there are 2 reasons why your mother and I cut through hard things so easily. I slightly intrigued Akira by pausing. The boy began to jump up and down with impatience, so I decided not to detain him and continued speaking. The first is that all shinobi use chakra. Most often it is ordinary chakra, since it enhances the strength of metal and its ability to cut objects. However, strong elemental users use elemental chakra to enhance the attributes of the kanai. Lightning chakra increases cutting force and causes severe numbness in the places where the blade strikes. Earth chakra strengthens the metal of the blade, that is, in simpler terms, the blade itself. Fire chakra is used for fiery swings and for greater destructiveness. However, there is a downside, since hot iron is easily deformed. There is no point in passing the water element through the blade, since it does not give a visible good effect, but the wind. I took out a regular kunai and imbued it with my rather strong wind chakra. Slightly aiming, I threw the kunai towards the trees where there were no people. The kunai, as predicted, flew through a dozen trees and crashed into a stone, piercing it through. After that, I threw another kunai, which got stuck in the first tree without even reaching the middle. Wind chakra greatly enhances the sharpness of the blade and its cutting ability, giving the ability to pierce rows of trees without even slowing down its speed. Wa, Akira exhaled after running for the first kunai. Twirling it between his fingers, he looked at the kunai with reverence. And what is the second reason if this one already gives the ability to do such damage? The second reason is the skill of the strike. I ruffled the boy's hair. Only by honing the blade strike and understanding how much force and where to apply, you can do this without chakra. Well, if you don't count using chakra to strengthen your body. How is that? Shouldn't the effect be the same as when you drink chakra from a weapon? He asked in surprise. I just shook my head. Such a mistake. Although he is still 8 years old. Let me demonstrate it to you. Many people ignore mastering this skill, stopping only at drinking from a weapon, and not even all Chunin and Jonin drink from weapons. I quickly created a large boulder with the help of Doton and knocked on it to show Akira that it was not hollow or weak. Taking out my katana, I began to feed my muscles with chakra as almost all shinobi do. Standing in a stance, I made a diagonal swing with the katana. The strong part of the katana hit the stone, after which I, with a second breath, on inertia, pressed on the sword, cutting it in half. A transparent slash came out of the sword, cutting the stone where the blade itself did not reach. The blow was so strong and fast that the dust around me exploded and scattered. What was that? Akira asked, coughing from the dust. The The small fog of dust settled and a picture of the rolled down upper part of the stone, which had been cut in half, opened up to our eyes. The lower part of the boulder stood where it had been. Akira shouted, "Unbelievable!" The boy began jumping up and down in joy and excitement. I looked at my work and nodded with satisfaction. Surprised sighs were heard from behind. Turning around to look, I saw my new 13 students who were looking at the stone almost in shock. The first to come out of shock was Mato Taimori, and he beamed. "Your youth burns with the inexorable passion of Namikaze Dano," he roared, clapping his hands on which weights were hanging, from which the claps were comparable in sound to thunderclaps. The others only winced from the volume of the sound. How long have you been here?" I put the katana in its sheath and looked dispassionately at the 13 jounin in front of me. With a mental message, I created a clone to take Akira away. "Are they your new students too, Chan?" he asked innocently, forcing me to ruffle his hair again. "Yes, and now go with the clone. Now your practice will begin. I believe that you can do it." The boy nodded enthusiastically and impatiently and ran to another part of the clearing. I and the Yuzuki's office. "What do you think about this, Tu-san?" There were only Takeshi, Yasushi, and Ashina in the room at the moment. The three of them were sitting at a low table, comfortably seated on the sofa. There was no food or drink on the low tea table this time, only a crystal ball that showed images of the Sannin training grounds. "Naruto is indeed a good teacher. Perhaps if your uncle hadn't tried to master Senjutsu on his own back then, he would be among the youth now. I don't want to cast doubt on Naruto's teaching skills or his handling of Senjutsu, but I also don't want anyone from my family to risk learning this craft of shinobi. It's enough that you risk your lives on missions." Ashina chuckled as Naruto cut through a rock with just his strength and technique, leaving the sword unharmed. He really is a jack of all trades. Even Ashina at his peak couldn't do something like that. "I haven't gone on missions for so long," Takeshi laughed, looking at his smiling father. Yasushi only grumbled. "Unlike them, he constantly goes on missions as a well-qualified shinobi. You'd better discuss swords like that. You don't give swords, nor do you accept help." "A week has passed and only half a sword is ready," the younger brother of the Yuzuki snorted. "Well, making legendary swords. Even according to the developments and records, it's still not an easy task. So patience, my son. I got carried away when I said that I could manage in 3 months. Even the simplest of them, like Nuabari, Kabutawari, and Shibuki, have a large chain of seals that make the swords legendary. For the same Nuabari, a soul bound in a seal is needed for the sword to work properly." "Father, you still haven't said what 3 more swords you want to create." "I don't believe that you'll just make a variation of the Kiba sword." Takeshi delicately picked up the conversation, interested in a topic that was important to him. "I don't know for sure yet. But I'll probably not just make a variation, but make other weapons with their elements. Like, say, some legendary wind tessin, or a blade that deforms due to the fire element. It will be possible to use the dodging and counterattack style with such a sword. As for Suiton and Doton, it's not that simple. I decided to take part of the tree god and create a bow staff on its basis with one pointed end of the fast-moving Suiton chakra. This will make the water incredibly dense, and the speed of the water will allow it to cut through almost everything without changing its shape. The second end of the wood will be even stronger than Sarutobi Ikizoku's diamond staff and will give the ability to do earth jutsu when touching the ground. Like, in fact, all other weapons. Interesting ideas. Yuzuki rubbed his chin, calculating some details in his mind and nodding to himself. "I will then take the drawings of Samahada and start making this one, since it seems to be the most difficult and tedious. You, Tu-san, can make the rest of the swords together with Ka-san. Then Yasushi, all that remains is for you to master good skills in Kenjutsu," Ashina said, looking into the crystal ball, or rather at the cut stone behind Naruto and the future Sannin. The next day. Report from Takeo Uzumaki. Konoha initial report on the basic state of Konoha. Report. Military force: there are 20,000 warriors. More than 18,000 of them are clan members. Report. No traitors or spies have been found in the high ranks of the village leadership. Report. Relations between the clans are tense. The Uchiha are placing a lot of emphasis on the loyalty of the Uzumaki, thereby completely suppressing the discontent and will to fight on the other side. The Senju side. Hypothesis. If the Uzumaki do not join the village, a civil war may begin. Outcome. The Uchiha clan will be able to suppress the uprising given the complete loyalty of the god of shinobi, Hashirama Senju. Report. Tobirama Senju, the younger brother of the head of the Senju Ikizoku, is greatly dissatisfied with the Uchiha's leadership. Many Senju are more loyal to Tobirama, preferring him to Hashirama. Report. Konoha Gakure wants to introduce a law that will reduce the age of the final test for becoming a shinobi. Approximately 8 years old. Outcome. There is much discontent. Even from Senju Hashirama. The matter has been postponed for later. Report. The Hyugo Ikizoku have completely united due to pressure from the Uchiha. The caged bird seal is invalid, and 7 elders died during the event. Report. The Inuzuka Ikizoku have sided with the Uchiha due to their belief that the strong should rule. Report. Sarutobi, Shimura, Aburame, Nara, Akimichi, and Yamanaka are not taking sides, preferring to remain neutral and developing their influence over civilians. Report. Konoha has high skills in detecting spies. About 10 to 12 spies have been found in a month. Information from spies is extremely useless. Presumably, they are cannon fodder for some purpose. Report. Madara Uchiha's ambitions are very simple. To take over the entire world and completely unify it in order to make peace in the world. Since my first day in the village, I have only heard about how the Uzumaki will join the village. Many are convinced of this, since the Uchiha clan, as the leadership of the village, spread the rumor about it. They completely forgot that the Uzumaki are part of the founders of the village of Yuzushiogakure. The following week after my arrival, it was announced that the Uzumaki wanted to hold friendly matches and that for this they would be preparing an arena for testing Jonin and Chunin. Each clan had to provide their strongest fighters if they wanted to gain the right to the red-haired beauties. Konoha Gakure knows that the Uzumaki blood can strengthen an existing Kekkei Genkai or give a new, stronger bloodline, which is what they want to take advantage of. However, the village hidden in the leaves does not know that there are many other clans in Yuzushiogakure. Their reaction to this is unknown. The possibility of capturing delegations is extremely rare, given that the entire world knows about the negotiations. An attempt at blackmail with war is possible. It was noticed that every week one Senju squad goes looking for someone. During the investigation I managed to find out that they were looking for members of the Namikaze clan, but for what purpose I was not able to find out. End of report. Reading all this, I was overcome by many different feelings. It was surprise and wariness, and many other things. Thousands and thousands of thoughts, ideas, and plans rushed through my head. It was clear that Uchiha, like Konoha, were too serious about their desires for Uzumaki, and they would not back down so easily, which was bad news. The report says 20,000 shinobi, which is not surprising. The Land of Fire is a huge country with favorable natural conditions. There are more residents there. And about the huge number of clan members. This is all nonsense if you know that during the clan wars in Ikizoku, shinobi were dragged by force, even those who had no relation to this clan, using them as meat, whose corpses would be walked over by more stately warriors. In fact, I am surprised that these people have not yet been weeded out, considering that the clans will have to take care of the shinobi they do not need. Although on the other hand it makes sense considering that now all clans want to take a higher place in the hierarchy of Konoha, the more shinobi, the more prestige. However, this is a double-edged sword, because the more you invite strangers to the clan, the more likely it is that spies will infiltrate. Which, by the way, are not in power in Konoha, judging by the report. I wasn't surprised by the report on tensions between clans and the opposition to Senju. After all, in my world, Madara and his followers, who were no more after the betrayal of the Uchiha, were in opposition. But what surprised me was the incident with the Hyuga clan. It's unthinkable. The clan of Byakugan owners refused to obey their relatives. I didn't think I'd ever see that. It seems the Uchiha really got on the nerves of the white-eyed ones. We need to think about a plan of action in case of failed negotiations. Will we be able to fight against an enemy with an advantage in troops of almost 2 times? Considering that I will finish training these 13 Sannin who have become my students in about a year or so, and considering that Fumiko's training is going by leaps and bounds, then perhaps we will be able to accumulate good combat power. And if we add here a new 10 swordsmen and my ANBU, then we ourselves will cope with Konoha. However, it is not a fact that Konoha will be alone. Considering that members of the Suzuki clan, the enemy clan of Raijin, are in Yuzushio, then A will not keep himself waiting long and join the war. And if Kiri joins them, then our position will become unenviable. However, unlike that time, they will not take us by surprise. I am sure of it. Kao-sama, you now have a second training session with the Sannin. My secretary and wife rolled into one entered the office. I only nodded at her words. You can take off your mask, Naruto, we are alone here. She immediately took off her porcelain mask and put it on her hip, and then, smiling her charming smile, came up to me from behind and began to give me a relaxing massage. Under the skillful and strong hands of my wife, my tense shoulders gradually relaxed. I moaned approvingly and leaned back in my chair. Maybe you can tell me about your new students, dear? She asked affectionately. I had already forgotten when I was alone with her even to talk. Well, I drawled, smiling serenely and remembering my peculiar students. You have probably already met Might Taimori. This man is incredibly eccentric, like Might Guy, his half-descendant. Perhaps in this period of time, the Taimori clan was destroyed, and this man made his name Might a surname for his children so that they would not be mistaken for descendants of the Taimori clan. His character is no different from Gai-sensei and is a kind soul. Next comes the proud Yoko Hagoromo, a girl who is not very sociable, and even if she speaks about strength. She, like Uchiha, is fixated on it and respects only the strong. However, despite this, she cares very much about her clansmen and shows kindness to the weak. The third head who decided to follow the path of the hermit was Terumi Rhea, but it seems to me that she does not have any desire for this power, and she went only to be with me more. Naruto narrowed her eyes at this point. She already lacked her husband's attention because of the children, Kimiko, Mita, work and other circumstances, and now this one had appeared. No, she certainly wasn't complaining, but she still wouldn't let him have more wives and make a harem. Even if he had to restore the clan 3 times. Just dare to lay eyes on, don't worry, darling. I was dripping with cold sweat. I shouldn't have mentioned Ray. Right now I can feel the monsters breathe behind me. Her hand squeezed the muscles of my neck, not allowing me to even turn around. If I don't tactfully change the subject, she'll just break my neck. In general, there are a lot of heirs besides the clan leaders. It seems that each leader wanted to keep the power of their loved ones so that there would be no feuds in the clans. The same Yuchi sent his insightful son, Yude Hataki, reminiscent of the serious and punctual Kakashi-sensei. Shiroki Yuki's younger sister, Kurohime, a cheerful girl unlike her sister. The heir of the Kurama clan, Amkai, an annoying guy, just like Sasuke. The nephew of the head of the Yuhi clan, unlike Amkai, who is similar to me. A dreamer. What's his name? Naruto smiled after hearing such reviews about his students from her husband. Yuhi Ryukaku. So, who was I? I started mentally going over the people I hadn't named. I think that's where the heirs and heirs ended. The rest of the clans were just ordinary shinobi jounins. The only interesting ones are the Uzumaki. The boy with the glass genome, and another Uzumaki. Makoto's older cousin. Also a good Fuin master, although not as genius as our operative. What do you think? Why did they send a member of the pillar with Balaton? My wife asked, slightly surprised. As you know, unlike other families with their special abilities, not everyone can awaken Balaton. After all, it is a Kekii Genkai like Shikatsumiyaku, Mokutan and others. Therefore, the influence of this family has weakened greatly, and it must be returned. Ashina-ji thinks so too, because if that family loses its influence, he will get lost among the rest of the Uzumaki. And it's simply impossible to track who will be born with this genome. Then it makes sense, Naruto nodded seriously, then put on her mask. Well, you're already late for the students' training, you should hurry. Bye. Naruto smiled softly as he stood up from his chair and disappeared in a yellow flash. Chapter 31. Konoha Arrival. The day of Uzumaki's arrival. Today, Konoha had a friendlier and more cheerful atmosphere. Children were playing balls, hide-and-seek, or tag in the streets. Adults were decorating their houses and cleaning up their neighborhoods to make them more presentable, and shinobi were running around doing C and D rank missions. For half a year now, the people of Konoha had been preparing for the arrival of guests from another country. People knew who the Uzumaki were and how dangerous they could be. There were too many rumors about the scarlet-haired devils from distant islands. However, the panic was initially dispelled by the Uchiha clan, who promised to keep this wild clan in check, also clarifying that a small delegation of only 50 people was coming to their village and there was no one to be afraid of. The clans of Konoha were preparing their fighters for the upcoming battles. It was agreed that from less prestigious clans a maximum of 1 to 2 fighters would go, and more prestigious ones could get the privilege of sending up to 5 fighters. Of course, the maximum 5 possible would go from Uchiha Ikizoku. Uchiha Madara himself chose them to show the power of Konoha and their clan to these islanders. All of them had a fully formed Sharingan, and were promised good rewards for their bloodthirstiness. No, killing in a friendly tournament was forbidden, but severely crippling either mentally or physically was not forbidden. The Uchiha want to take advantage of this by further breaking the Uzumaki's will to resist. On the other hand, the other clans were not sitting idle either and were thinking about how to get an alliance with the scarlet-haired demons to strengthen their positions. They were 2 convenient allies. An increase in the gene pool with pure Uzumaki genes, strengthening any bloodline, 1,000-year-old knowledge of Fuinjutsu, Juinjutsu and Kekai Ninjutsu, a huge number of shinobi for one clan and the Uzumaki market making up 1/7 of the entire world market. It was undeniable that everyone wanted to get the loyalty of this clan. So thought Tobirama, who was the unofficial head of his clan. After Senju entered the village built by the Uchihas, his clan began to be tamed and humiliated in every possible way. The clan's income from missions decreased by 40%, which increased the number of starving people in the clan and reduced the birth rate by as much as 20%. At this rate, the clan will be nothing but memories in the next 20 to 30 years. Generations change too quickly in his world. His blind brother does not see the loss that the Senju are now in, rejoicing that both warring clans have stopped bloodshed. Always he followed his brother, because he considered Hashirama to be a leader. A dreamer who will lead their clan to prosperity. Tobirama realized too late that his brother is just a naive fool who can be easily controlled. And this is the first question when the white-haired Senju goes to his brother. At all costs he must save his clan from such a fate. Senju-san, the weather is nice today, isn't it? The head of the Inuzuka clan, Inuzuka Kida, asked with a wide grin reminiscent of a wolf's grin. It was a chestnut-haired, broad-shouldered man of about 35 years of average height for a shinobi. Senju was now walking through the park built by his brother, slowly thinking about the situation of his clan, and did not dream of meeting anyone. Especially with the arrogant Inuzuka who reminded him so much of these Uchiha. Fortunately, the Inuzuka were not even partially as strong as the red-eyed clan. But on the other hand, dog breeders were uncultured and moral animals in terms of manners. For them, the concept of a permanent partner, love and other things does not exist. They reproduce almost at the speed of his Hiraishina without remorse with any person from the clan. Children often have different fathers and do not even know who their father is. Tobirama was disgusted by this arrangement. Yes, today the weather is really beautiful, Senju said, folding his hands behind his back. Do you need something? Brother is currently in the clan leader's residence. If you want to talk about clan matters, then contact him. No, what are you saying? I just wanted to unwind before the Scarlet Devils came, Kida answered with a semblance of a grin. You can't wait for them to come either. You're probably thinking about how to get one of the red-haired ones for personal use. Inuzuka laughed loudly, poking an irritated Tobirama in the side. However, the white-haired man did not answer the question, preferring silence. Eventually, The older man calmed down and looked at the guy with condescension. Relax, they will give you one. The Uzumaki have nowhere to go. After all, you are the younger brother of one of the co-founders of the village, exclaimed the head of the clan. Tobarama raised an eyebrow. Why did this man even decide that he needed a girl? Why did you decide that the Uzumaki would even give away girls from their clan? Senju was curious to know how such a primitive person like Kita thinks, so he asked this question. Where will they go when they join? Hokage-sama, along with the Uchihas and other Ikuzoku, will oblige them to make blood alliances, or tell them to sell their girls at their market. In that case, it will be difficult for Uzumaki to withstand the onslaught of so many people, and they will bend under our system. Then we will grab our share. I want a harem of red-haired people, and I will get it in such a scenario. In fact, for Kita Inuzuka to think so far was an unheard of achievement. This man was strong for his clan, but very, very stupid, so he only respected such a primitive thing as strength. The Uchiha had strength, so the Inuzuka were supporters of this clan. However, Tobarama never thought that Kita would think of such a thing. Was his judgment about the head of the Inuzuka clan wrong? At least, that's what one of my told me. Now everything is clear. Tobarama nodded to himself. After all, he was not mistaken when he considered Kita stupid. Madara, along with his close warriors, had been waiting for the Uzumaki delegation to arrive in their village for 2 hours already. According to their scouts, the scarlet-haired devils were supposed to arrive for dinner, but it seemed that something had happened, since they were 2 hours late. Considering that there was a whole delegation, and it was moving at a leisurely pace, it was normal for them to have difficulties along the way. But Madara Uchiha had never been patient. He always demanded punctuality and timeliness from his subordinates. Now he was also somewhat irritated, and was ready to send his people to search for Uzumaki at any second. The people standing nearby were also not in the best mood, as they had to stand next to the angry head of the Uchiha clan and the village as a whole. The only one who was still smiling sincerely was the head of the Senju clan, Senju Hashirama. This man is generally difficult to get mad. The only time he lost his temper was when the children were forced to participate in dangerous sorties. Then he almost had a large-scale fight with the Hokage of the village within the Konoha area. But Tobarama Senju, Hashirama's brother, managed to stop the crisis by teleporting both fighters outside the village and calming them down. The gray-haired man himself stood next to his brother, arms crossed, indifferently watching the torment of the other shinobi. He was able to maintain a facade of calm even better than the Uchiha, proving it in practice. However, at one point, one of the crossed arms trembled, and he himself raised an eyebrow. He felt them. And there were not only Uzumaki. The Uzumaki delegation is already close. They will be visible in about 2 minutes, he said calmly, not betraying a drop of excitement in his voice. Hashirama, hearing his brother's words, smiled even wider. The others also perked up and looked towards the path leading to the forest with new intensity. The head of the Hyuga clan, who had been resting from excessive use of his Byakugan, activated it again. The delegation is indeed close. However, the head of the white-eyed clan whispered tensely, there are only 20 people from the Uzumaki clan, the remaining 30 are from other clans. Absolutely everyone except Tobarama was surprised by these words. Some of them tensed up thinking that the Uzumaki wanted to do something, but they were calmed by the hand of the head of the Uchiha clan. Madara simply narrowed his eyes thinking about all the possible options for why 3/5 of the people in the delegation were not Uzumaki, but came from another clan. The only plausible option is that the Uzumaki invited some of the clans. In that case, the negotiations are already a failure, considering that Konoha wants to demand the full accession of the Uzumaki. What are we going to do, Aniki? Izuna also guessed and frowned at the path where the Uzumaki would soon appear. It would be a shame if we kick them out without even starting negotiations. Perhaps we can convince them to leave their village and other clans to join us, Shodai Hokage said indifferently. I understand you. Izuna nodded to his brother with new determination, looking into the distance. At the same time, vague outlines of people began to appear in the forest until they completely emerged from the forest, into the open area that was already considered part of Konoha. It was the Uzumaki group from the village of Uzushio-gakure. The Uzumaki group, which consists mainly of shinobi from other clans. If there were only Uzumaki, you could tell by the red hair. But here, a whole range of colors gathered, and bright blondes, and dull blondes, redheads, chestnut-haired, brunettes, and brown-haired. There were even blue-haired ones. However, everyone was united by the same clothes, a red shinobi shirt, a blue vest, and a Hittite with a whirlpool symbol engraved on it. Hello Yuzukage Dano and the people of your village. Uchiha Madara was the first to greet the guests, nodding to them. The Konoha shinobi followed his example and bowed to the guests. In response, the arrivals also bowed, thereby greeting the owners of these lands. The main one, the one who was dressed in the robes of the Kage of the Whirlpool, took off his hat and smiled good-naturedly. Call me Takashi, Madara Dano. After all, we are not very different in status and origin. Madara nodded at the Uzushio-gakure Kage's request. Although he was about 3 decades younger than the Uzukage, he felt no compunction about calling Takashi Dano by his first name. Then, Takashi Dano, please follow my subordinates to my right, they will show you your residence during the negotiations. Madara waved his hand, signaling the Konoha members to show the way to their temporary quarters. Follow me, Yuzukage-sama, said a man of about 30 with black hair and a fan symbol on his back. The red-haired village leader nodded and followed the Uchiha. The entire Uzumaki delegation, who had been standing quietly and tensely behind their Kage, quickly followed Takashi's example and slowly began to walk away from the main gate. The Konoha members also stood as quietly as they could. The only thing that could come out of the shinobi's mouths were small whispers when they discussed the shinobi they had seen. The Inuzuka gnashed their teeth when they saw the impassive Hatake, whom they had fought with 2 or 3 years ago. Izuna frowned when he saw the 3 members of the Hagoromo clan with their clan embroidery on their backs. The other Uchiha were also not happy with them, as well as the members of the Yuhi clan, Kurama and Chinoike. Some opened their mouths when they saw the members of this clan, since the death of their clan was announced to the whole world. Uchiha Ikizoku himself drove the blood-eyed into the Valley of Hell. It was unthinkable to think that the Uzumaki would decide to help this clan, since the Chinoike had a bad reputation after killing the daimyo of the Land of Lightning. This would bring down a storm of indignation towards the red-haired from Kaminari no Kuni and Kumogakure. The Hyuga tensed up when they saw the shinobi in provocative clothes. Their sworn enemies, the eternally young members of the Taimori clan who even on the battlefield sparkled with their snow-white teeth. Absolutely everyone was tense and ready for battle. The atmosphere was getting more and more tense. The hands of some shinobi had already begun to tremble, slowly descending to the pouch for kunai. Naruto? Hashirama's Senju's surprised cry cut through the tense silence, causing some to breathe a sigh of relief. Tobirama stared at his brother, raising an eyebrow and following his gaze. There, indeed, stood a calm Naruto Namikaze. Already tall, broad-shouldered, the blonde radiated stateliness and strength with his whole appearance. Everyone turned their attention to the man whose presence one of the shinobi gods had acknowledged. This man seemed not to be from the clan at all, as evidenced by the unfamiliar embroidery on this man's shoulders and back. The Uchiha snorted. Again the Senju were finding unworthy people to talk to. After all, Tobirama was also interested in this man. After a moment, everyone stopped looking at the blonde and the Senju brothers, starting to discuss their own and whisper among themselves. Hashirama, Tobirama, Naruto acknowledged, nodding weakly to the Senju who had approached him. The eldest brother was radiating excitement, while the youngest was collected and calm. As always. Kami-sama, we were looking for you for so long, we thought you were dead. But it turns out you became citizens of the Whirlpool country. What a surprise, Hashirama said, gesturing comically with his hands. How is Naruko? Where is she now? I don't see her. What have you been doing all this time? Why haven't you contacted me? I was so worried about you, I thought I'd lost you too. Naruko is fine, she's in our house now, the blonde said with a slight smile, remembering his wife. In fact, as soon as we left that clearing, we went to the Whirlpool village, where they accepted us with some difficulty. We didn't have time to contact anyone after that. Ah, I see. But we were able to make a truce with the Uchihas and finally settle in one place. Now, if we make an alliance with you, then this will be the beginning of the path to a world without wars. With a wide smile, throwing up his hands, Senju said. Brother, you know that this is unrealistic? The negotiations are already 99% a failure, Tobirama asked dryly. Hashirama drooped and looked at his brother pitifully. Why don't you believe that we can come to an agreement? If everyone tries to strive for peace, then we will definitely make an alliance. Tobirama rolled his eyes at another banal remark of his brother, but decided to remain silent. Naruto listened to the entire dialogue with a smile and some nostalgia for the past. He didn't think that he missed the bickering of the two brothers. So, what news do you have with Naruto? The younger Senju smoothly changed the topic, looking at the still smiling blonde. Hashirama also looked at Naruto with interest. Too much has happened, it will be difficult to list everything, and I don't think that such personal things should be discussed when many people are warming their ears, Naruto answered with a slight grin. The Senju brothers nodded at such a statement. After all, even the walls have ears. An unwritten rule of shinobi. Then, how about a tea party at the residence of the head of the Senju clan by this evening? The head of Senju Ikizoku suggested. His younger brother nodded in confirmation. I agree. But I won't come alone, do you mind? The blonde answered. And with whom? Hashirama asked puzzledly. The Senju brothers were generally confused by such a question. They thought that Naruto would not particularly contact anyone except Naruto, but it seemed that he had a good friend, or friends. With my wife. Wife? Hashirama shouted obscenely, which riveted the gaze of everyone around him. Starting from civilians and Konoha shinobi, ending with people from Yuzushio. A nervous smile touched his lips, and he scratched the back of his head trying to ignore all the looks. Tobirama was also shocked and began to look around for Naruto, then realized that she was not here and looked at the blonde in surprise. Thinking about the wild idea that Naruto had a wife, but it was not Naruto. Yes, with a wife. You'll see her in the evening. The Senju finally came to their senses and nodded awkwardly then. Hashirama, Tobirama, I'll see you later. My name is, Naruto said to his brothers, seeing how Mito was calling him to her. Until the evening, Tobirama nodded, shutting up his brother who was about to say something. Slowly, their old acquaintance disappeared among the crowd. The brothers were left looking at Naruto's back and thinking about how much he had changed. The previously impassive and cold teenager had turned into a calm and smiling man. And if Hashirama was thinking about how to ask Naruto to help him with his idea of world peace, then Tobirama was thinking about how to ask Naruto to help save his clan. The Uzumaki are probably the most cheerful, not arrogant, and kind people I have ever met. They focus too much on the good, ignoring the bad. That's what I like about them. They are the anti-Uchiha. And from the very first day I noticed their difference from Konoha. Where Konoha would discuss and condemn a person, the Uzumaki would simply laugh. Where any other clan would haughtily raise their head, the Uzumaki would only smile widely or shyly rub their heads. Where any shinobi would begin to succumb to hatred, the Uzumaki found the strength to love. Truly the most amazing people. And I got very used to this mentality, where people care about each other for the truth, selflessly helping each other. This attitude had a strong impact on other clans, too, slowly penetrating their consciousness, forcing them to think the same way and accept the values of the red-haired ones. By the end of the first half-year, I understood why Takashi was so zealously worried about the safety of his people. You know, it's nice when people care about each other so much, considering all the islanders as family. It doesn't matter whether you just came here or have been living here for 100 years. Now, looking at the citizens of Konoha and hearing their whispers, I was grateful to Kami for giving me the opportunity to settle with Uzumaki and revive my clan there. I had no sympathy for my old village at all, and looking at the face of Madara Uchiha carved out of stone, I understood that Konoha is not my home. My home is Yuzushio-gakure, where my children, wives and family live. Mito, seeing how I smiled at the whispers around us, twirled her finger at her temple, to which Fumiko, who saw this scene, giggled weakly. And yet, even Mito is changing, no longer even embarrassed to show inappropriate gestures for Heim in unfamiliar settlements. After about 10 minutes of walking, we finally reached the civilian quarter assigned to us. Many Uzumaki sighed at the enormity of the houses and their inefficiency in terms of saving space. They were already accustomed to living with few compactly, but comfortably. And here's such unnecessary luxury. In general, the houses themselves were single-story, in a semi-traditional Japanese style, and were wide, occupying huge areas, unlike the Uzumaki multi-story buildings. It was decided that the delegation would live in 11 houses. In each, 5 shinobi, except for 2 of them. In one lived the Yuzukage with his brother and 1 bodyguard. And in the second, the clan's Heim with her husband. That is, Mita and I will live separately, which was good news. We quickly put our things in the closets. After all, we only took the most important things for the trip. We didn't even take clothes for political affairs, since shinobi don't require you to dress nicely for such meetings. Even at the Gakage Kaiden, the conference of the 5 Kaige, shinobi didn't wear traditional clothes, preferring either everyday clothes or their combat gear. Therefore, almost all of us came light, and considering the red-haired Fuin, there was no need to carry anything with us. The house had only 4 rooms, a kitchen, a dining room where they ate, a bathroom and a bedroom. They were separated by a long, labyrinth-like corridor and thin walls between the rooms. The bed in the bedroom was near the window, from which trunks of artificially grown trees were visible. It must have been Hashirama's doing, they just smelt of Senjutsu. Anyway, while we looked around and settled in, it was already getting dark, and we decided that it was time to get ready to go visit, considering that we would also like to walk around Konoha. Before leaving the temporary home, we decided to put a joint silencing seal. Joint seals are good because they are much more difficult to break, and no Konoha ninja will be able to do it. Even Uzumaki will need 2 days to break this seal, and during this time, interference with the seals and an attempt to break it will be visible. Therefore, with peace of mind, we left the house and went towards the Konoha Market District council room. The entire office was tense. No one expected that the Uzumaki would not come alone. It was a shock to all of them. Most had already guessed which way the negotiations would go. Many clans had placed a big bet on acquiring an alliance with the Uzumaki. Some clans had already broken their trade agreements with their suppliers, hoping for the infusion of the Uzumaki trade market into Konoha with huge discounts. Some had even managed to make enemies in Konoha, hoping to pull the scarlet-haired clan over to their side in order to have a stronger position as a clan. And now, realizing that all this would end in failure, they nervously bit their nails and prayed to Kami that the leader of their village would come up with a way to draw the islanders into their settlement. Despite the fact that Konoha has existed for only a couple of years, it has already gained great authority not only in the Land of Fire, but also in other countries. Impeccable execution of missions, the union of the strongest clans of Hai no Kuni, and enormous combat power attracted both investors and merchants. But the same can be said about other villages. Yuzushiogakur has been an autonomous shinobi village for 30 years without the support of the daimyo, but with a large trade market throughout the world. Kumogakur, like Iwagakur, has several clans that are actively fighting each other to take a higher position. Sunagakur and Kirigakur are in the same boat with them, but Konoha wanted to rise. Their Hokage believed that all the lands should belong to them, which they did not want to deny themselves. Why did not the geniuses and analysts from the Nara clan calculate this outcome? Madara asked dryly, massaging his temple. The reindeer herder bristled, but decided not to respond to his Kage's taunt. Forgive me, Uchiha-sama. Our shinobi did indeed consider this option, but rejected it due to its unlikelihood. The Yuzushiogakur shinobi did a great job of hiding such information. After all, if the clans had joined the village recently, they would hardly have agreed to send their warriors. However, there is good news. Despite the fact that the majority of the delegation are representatives of other clans, in the village everything is different. These clans are essentially small in number, and did not add much combat power to the village. So with the right distribution of information, it will be possible to add the Uzumaki to Konoha, making the other clans vassals of the red-haired ones. Excluded. The leader of the Shimura clan stood up abruptly. This clan was also famous for its good mind, so everyone looked at the old man with interest. The Uzumaki will gain too much influence. They are already considered a large clan, possibly exceeding both of our great clans combined in numbers. And adding a dozen vassal clans and numerous offers of alliances to them will simply tip the scales in their favor, and it is not a fact that the village will not suffer from this. What do you propose in return? Tobirama asked with interest, this time participating in the council for his brother's place. Since this was an unscheduled meeting, and he and his brother had already invited guests, Hashirama decided to stay and receive them while Tobirama took his brother's post. We take on too much. Pursuing many goals, we may not achieve any of them. I am against the Uzumaki living in our village. I agree. Sarutobi Sasuke, the young head of the Sarutobi clan and the man who had come closest to the level of power of the younger Senju and Uchiha brothers, spoke up. Even if we imagine a situation where the Uzumaki build a hidden village in Hinokuni, what do you think will happen? Slowly, realization entered the minds of the other clan heads. Yes. The daimyo will immediately support them, since most of the things in his palace are things from the Uzumaki market. And without the daimyo's support, our trade routes and stable receipt of missions will come to an end. I also considered this option, which is why I was initially against this idea. We cannot weaken the influence of the Uzumaki without infringing on them, and if we offer an unfavorable deal, they will not even consider it. Now, it would be best if we agree with them on mutual discounts on each other's markets, on assistance in transporting goods through each other's lands, and a military alliance. What if we, Madara indifferently laid his head on one of his hands, not caring how he looked, capture Yazushio? Their entire market, Fuinjutsu scrolls, wealth, artifacts, slaves and concubines will become ours. Then we won't have to make concessions. What are you talking about? They are in an ancient alliance with the Senju. Tobirama flared up. We will not do such a thing. Yorikizoku is now part of Konoha. And now it is more connected with the Uchiha and other clans than with the Uzumaki. And if you were in an alliance since ancient times, why didn't they help you in the past wars? The Uchiha raised an eyebrow, allowing his interlocutor to continue the conversation. These are personal matters between the Ikizoku, and I do not intend to divulge them, just as I do not intend to betray my allies, Tobirama growled, standing his ground. What will the other clan heads say? Madara looked at all the shinobi with a bored look. Agree to peace, having limited benefit from it? Or go and squash Uzumaki and get everything you dream of? Hyuga Ikizoku will stand aside from this issue. We will accept the decisions of the majority. The pearl-eyed shinobi in white robes answered melodically. Nara Ikizoku is against the decision to go to war with Uzumaki and agrees with Senju. The head of the Nara clan put in his sense. Akimichi Ikizoku supports Nara Ikizoku and Yamanaka Ikizoku supports Nara Ikizoku. The reindeer herder's allies said almost in sync. The Inazuki support our Kage and are ready to go plunder Uzumaki right now. Kida grinned predatorily. Shimura Ikizoku is for plundering and is supported by Uchiha-sama. The old man nodded approvingly. Aburame Ikizoku supports the Hokage. The head of this clan said dryly and clearly. Everyone looked at Sarutobi Sasuke, whose vote was decisive. 4 votes on each team. On one hand, the Senju, to whom he was grateful for helping their clan, and also for giving the monkey summoning that Hashirama Senju himself showed off. And on the other hand, the opportunity to expand their trade routes and get rid of a competitor with the subsequent plunder of his wealth. If Sasuke were more selfish, he would have immediately chosen the second option, but now he hesitated. Why did the fate of their village depend on the decision of his vote? Shouldn't the advisors and Kage be doing this? Sighing, he looked at Madara, whose eyes flashed eerily upon contact with him, and at Tobirama, whose dispassionate gaze was drilling a hole in him. It was necessary to tell Hyuga earlier that he was neutral, and not sweat now trying to choose the best option. Did it seem to him, or did the heads of the clans approach him in anticipation of an answer? Like my Ikizoku, we side with Senju Ikizoku. Tobirama seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as did the other 3 heads who were against the idea. The rest of the heads either sat down in their seats in frustration, slapping the table like Inuzuka, or sked like old Shimura. That! Madara cast a disappointed look at the council and stood up from his seat. Is what distinguishes you from Uchiha Ikuzoku, who is in charge of the village. We are not afraid to take what is ours, and I will not give up mine. There will be a raid on the Uzumaki, remember my words. But Senju gritted his teeth as the Hokage turned his back to the council and began to slowly walk out. Konoha, as always, was not very welcoming. People walking around us looked at us ambiguously. There was already a rumor that the Uzumaki brought a lot of other clans with them, and this would ruin the negotiations between the 2 villages. Of course, many still believed that everything would work out, but among the people there were already people who began to swear at the scarlet-haired ones. The Uchiha Special Unit abruptly took them away so that they would not provoke a conflict, of which there are plenty in Konoha itself. The shopping district itself was tiny compared to the Uzushio shopping district. Sure, the range of fruits and vegetables might be wider due to the climate and the presence of Senju in the village, but in other respects, from food to household items and weapons, Konoha was inferior. And it's not about the quality of the weapon, but about the fact that the Uzumaki use fuin on everything, and also have a huge arsenal of different weapons. Let's say that ordinary staffs and spears are considered useless, since their shafts can easily be broken with chakra or cut in half by a sword. Of course, there is an exception in the form of Sarutobi's diamond staff, but still, hardly a dozen shinobi use a staff as a weapon. And the Uzumaki, thanks to fuin, can strengthen the structure of the weapon itself, or even make modifications. Therefore, what is considered impractical in the rest of the world has a different value in Uzushio-Gakure. Anyway, slightly disappointed, we left the market square and headed towards the residence of the head of Senju Ikizoku, maneuvering through the crowd of Konoha civilians. Of course, at first we got lost, since everything was not laid out like in my childhood, and I didn't really remember where Tsunade lived. But in the end we were able to find the Senju quarter, and from there it was easy for us to ask one person to show us the head's house. Standing in front of the door, I looked closely at the Senju clan mark on it. Well, it seems like Hashirama's chakra is felt there. Knock knock. We knocked on the door, patiently waiting for the owners. A crash and a cry of, "I'm coming!" were heard in the house. After that, the door opened wide. "Oh, and I've been waiting for you for a long time," Senju chuckled cheerfully, after which he stopped dead in his tracks, examining my wife. "Wow," he muttered, seeing her angelic appearance. I grinned, looking at Mito, who had turned slightly pink. "Hello Hashirama, meet my wife, Mito Uzumaki, and this is Hashirama, my childhood friend," I answered, thinking a little. Still, even though they were watching us on behalf of their father, they did not try to drag us into their war, ensuring peace in our old clearing. For which I was grateful to them. Mito extended her hand to Hashirama. Yes, I'm very pleased to meet you." Hashirama immediately took her hand and began to shake it vigorously in a handshake. After about 10 seconds, he came to his senses and blushed. "Oh, excuse me, please come in." Mito looked at him like he was crazy, but she entered the house taking my hand. "Excuse me, Tobi-kun will be back soon, let's go to the hall," Senju said excitedly, leading us into one of the rooms of his house. The house of the head of the Senju clan was spacious, I would even say large. Especially for 2 people who mostly lived on the battlefield, and not at home. "It's okay," I shook my head. Mito was not against it either, after all, they were old friends of Naruto. "Then sit down." Hashirama jumped and sat down himself near the table filled with food. Mito and I sat down opposite him. "Tell me what interesting things happened to you," I grinned. Hashirama pursed his lips. "You probably heard," he began, slightly doomed. "Tasan died, I became the head of the clan." I winced. The news of the death of the heads of both clans spread throughout the world, since it was Butsuma and Taijima who survived for a long time despite the bitterness of the old feud and attempts to destroy the enemy clan. "My condolences," I said calmly. "And what about you?" Hashirama began to absorb the food and changed the subject to distract himself. And as for me, I didn't even know where to start. Mito smiled sarcastically. He became a citizen of Yuzushiogakure. He founded his clan there, married Naruko-chan and me. He is also now the father of 3 children and just a wonderful husband, she breathed out dreamily, finishing her monologue. Hashirama looked more and more shocked with each word of the girl, until in the end his eyes turned into saucers. In response to such an act of my wife, I could only bang my forehead on my hand. I see, Hashirama finally croaked. While he was realizing everything, Mito and I slowly continued eating the food. Their takoyaki turned out delicious. And you didn't waste any time, he finally chuckled, scratching his head, the father of 3 children? How is it so fast? Not even 3 years have passed. 2 are my clanmates, they didn't manage to save the parents, but they took in the orphans, I shrugged. Hashirama nodded his head, it made sense to him. The 3rd one is your child, he guessed and looked at Mito. She shook her head and nodded towards Naruto. Their daughter with Naruko. Ah, congratulations, Senju grinned widely and gave me a thumbs up. What did you name her? In honor of the mother of her brother and sister, Kimiko Namikaze, Mito answered, finishing her food. And how are things with you? I asked, with the Uchiha? Old rivals and enemies, after all. Ever since the Uchiha's victory, I've been interested in the question of their future relationship with the Senju. It's just that in my world, where the Senju won, the Uchiha weren't oppressed, since the forest people were good-natured and friendly, unlike the arrogant and proud Uchiha, for whom the Senju were essentially a thorn in the side. If you don't count the frequent skirmishes, then everything is fine. I think that everything will get better soon. So many people lost their relatives in the war, and no one will aggravate the situation. Hashirama chuckled. Before we could talk, the front door suddenly swung open loudly. Bad words were heard from the entrance. We all tensed up, thinking that someone had broken in, and then Hashirama relaxed. It's Tobirama. The gloomy younger brother entered the room where we were sitting. He nodded, acknowledging us. Aniki, we have an emergency, he said gloomily, measuring Hashirama with his gaze.